We begin today the Gemara on Daf Kuf Chof Amud Beis, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, where it says Ule Beishamai. Okay, so just a short introduction how the Gemara got here. We're in the middle of a sugya. The Gemara is discussing the Nachla of Eretz Yisrael, and it's discussing the case of Bnei Slavchad that inherit from their father. And because of this, it says in the Psukim that in that generation, anybody that is inheriting from his father should not, that's a woman that inherits from her father, should not go and marry someone from a different shevet. So it shouldn't, the Yerusha shouldn't go to a different shevet. And at that the Gemara brought the lashon of the pasuk that it says, Zeh Hadovar. Zeh Hadovar teaches that this is only for that generation, but not the next generation. The word Zeh is an exclusion. And then the Gemara discussed the lashon of Zeh Hadovar that it similar says by Shchutei Chutz, and it also says Zeh Hadovar regarding Hafaras Nedarim in the beginning of Parshas Matos. Zeh Hadovar. What do those words Zeh Hadovar there mean? It doesn't mean to say that it's only in that generation and not in the future. And the Gemara said that there's a Gzeir Shaveh, and we compare them to one another, and there's halachas we learn from Kotshim to Hafaras Nedarim, and back from Hafaras Nedarim to Kotshim. And the Gemara then proved that according to Beishamai, he does not hold of this Gzeir Shaveh, as the Gemara proved before. Now, if that's the case, one of the halachas that was learned out from the Gzeir Shaveh is that we learn from what it says by Kotshim, the lashon of the pasuk there, that by Hafaras Nedarim, 3 hadyotis could serve as a bezdin to be mater or neder. But if Beishamai does not hold of this Gzeir Shaveh, so here the Gemara will address what is the source, according to Beishamai, for this halacha that by Hafaras Nedarim, 3 hadyotis could be mater the neder. Okay, so let's begin the Gemara inside. Well, the Beishamai, the less lu Gzeir Shaveh, Beishamai that does not hold of this Gzeir Shaveh. Hafaras Nedarim b'shloisha hadyotis men alahu. How do they know this halacha that to be mater a neder? The Gemara uses the term Hafaras Nedarim, but it's really referring to that to be mater a neder by a chacham. So the Gemara explained before it can be done with a yachid, a mumche, but it can be done then with 3 hadyotis. So from where do Beishamai know this halacha? Answers the Gemara, Nafkaluhu, they learn it out midetanya from what this that it says in a brayse. Here the Gemara will bring a brayse, and the language of the brayse on a simple level is difficult to understand, and the Gemara will explain it, and we'll see the source for this halacha according to Beishamai. So the Brayser brings the pasuk in Parshas Emor, in the parsha where it speaks about the Yomim Tovim, and it says, "Vayedaber Moshe es Moed Hashem al Bnei Yisrael." What is this pasuk coming to say? The extra pasuk of Moed Hashem. Rabbi Yosef Lili says, "Moed Hashem Nemru." The Yomim Tovim are said here. Shabbos Bereishis Lo Nemra. However, Shabbos Bereishis, which refers to every Shabbos, it's called Shabbos Bereishis to distinguish it from Yomim Tovim, because the Torah also uses the term Shabbos Shabbosim regarding Yomim Tovim. So, regarding Shabbos, we do not speak of here. Now, what Rabbi Yosef really means, we'll see. Ben Azai says, Maya de Hashem Nemru. What's being said here is Yomim Tovim, Hafaras Nedarim Lo Nemra. But to be mater a neder, that does not say here. Okay, so now what is going on over here? So the Gemara says that Rabbi Yossi, or another gear says Ravasi, Bar Nosen, have a gomer, la hamasnita. He was learning this brayse, he didn't know how to explain it. So Azal Basrei Rav Sheshes L'Nerdo. He went to Nerdo to find Rav Sheshes to ask him, what's the meaning of this brayse? And he couldn't find him. So he followed him and went to see if he's in Mechuzah and Ashkechei, and there he found him. Amalei, so Rav Sheshes said and explained as follows. My Moed Hashem Nemru Shabbos Bereishis Lo Nemra. Oh, this was the question that Rav Yossi or Rav Asi Bar Nosen asked him. What does this mean when the Brayse says that it says in the Torah Moed Hashem, but it does not say Shabbos Bereishis? Amalei, Rav Sheshes explained him. Moed Hashem, when it comes to Yomim Tovim, Tzrichin Kiddush Bezdin, they have to be sanctified by the Bezdin. What this means is, Bezdin is Mekadosh T'Chaydish. Bezdin is the one that decides if there has to be an Ibur of the year, an extra Adar in that year, and that will establish the time of the Yom Tovim. And that applies only to when it comes to a Yom Tiv. The pasuk says, Asher Tikra Isam b'Mayadam. So it's through the Bezdin that's Mekadosh T'Chaydish, and everyone says Mekudish B'Kudish. However, Shabbos Bereishis ain't Tzricha Kiddush Bezdin. When it comes to Shabbos, we don't sanctify the day and then based on sanctifying the day on Sunday, that the seventh day would then be Shabbos. Doesn't work that way, because it says Moed Hashem, this extra pasuk, that that's only for the Yom Tovim and not for Shabbos. That's the pshat of the Tanakama. And the Gemara explains, because I would think to say, since Shabbos is mentioned in the parsha of Moedos here, in this parsha in Emoir, so I would think to buy Kiddush Bezdin, Kamoedos. Maybe you should have to be sanctified by the Bezdin, just like Yom Tovim. Kamash Malon, therefore the pasuk comes and says here that no, that Moed Hashem have to be sanctified by the Bezdin through being Mekadosh to Chodesh, as I mentioned, and not Yom Tovim. That's the pshat of the Tanakama. Now, my Moed Hashem Nemru Hafaris and Darum Lei Nemra. What is the meaning of second opinion of the Braisa Ben Azai that says Moed Hashem, but Hafaris Nadanim is not mentioned here? And here we'll see the source for the halacha of 3 Adyetis. What it means is Moed Hashem Tzrichen Mumchen. When it comes to establish a new Chodesh, so for this you need a proper bezdin of Mumchen. And as the Rashbam brings, this is learned out in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah from what it says by Kiddush HaChodesh that the Eibusha tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayem Hashem al Moshe ve'el Aaron, HaChodesh is Elachem. So Moshe is the greatest Mumche in Klal Yisrael, but yet he can't be Mekadosh HaChodesh himself, has to be with Moshe and Aaron. And then you have to have a third, so it shouldn't be 2. 2 is not a bezdin, you have to have 3. Okay, so that's what we know b'negei to Moed Hashem, that it's established by the bezdin, that's Mekadosh HaChodesh, and I must be Mumchen. Hafaris Nedarim, and it's Tzrichen Mumchen. But when you come to be Mater and Neder, for that you don't need Mumchen, it could be the 3 Hedyotis. And this is where we learn it out from, according to Beishamai. So the Gemara asks on this, Ba'at V'har Roshei Hamatis Ksiv, in the Pasuk, when it speaks about being Mater and Neder, it says Roshei Hamatis, the leaders of the Shvatim, which means that it has to be a great person of Mumche. Answers the Gemara, as the Gemara already answered this before, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Yechanan, B'yachid Mumche. That pasuk is only talking about a Yachid that's a Mumche. If he's alone, being Matar the Neder, then he has to be a Mumche. And the Rashbam explained before already, the Lashon Rabbim of Roshei Hamatais does not mean that we're talking about over here more than one, but it's talking B'chlal about the Roshei Hamatais. But when you have one, then it has to be a Mumche. We learned over there, this is going to be related, going back to what we learned before about the Isser or the Mitzvah in the first generation, not to marry a woman that's inheriting from her father, not to marry into another Shevet, so the Yerusha should not be transferred to a different Shevet. So we learned over there in the end of Masechta Tainis. Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, there weren't Yomim Tovim for Yidden that are as great as the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Shebehen, B'nois Yerushalayim, Yotzes, B'kli Lavan, the daughters of Yerushalayim would go out in white garments, Shulin, and they were borrowed. Shalei Levayish is Mishainlai. So one that doesn't have should not be embarrassed, because everybody is borrowing and everyone's the same. And this is a big expression of an Avos Yisrael and the Achdas Yisrael between them. So that's what it says there in the Mishnah. So the Gemara asks, Bishlam Yom Kippurim, it's understood why Yom Kippur is such a great Yom Tiv, Yom Slicha Mechila. It's a day that David forgives Yidden. And Yom Shenitna by Luchas Achreinis. It's the day that the Eibusha gave Yidden the second Luchas. The Rashbam goes through here the calculation of the dates from when Moshe Rabbeinu went up the first time to Har Sinai on the 6th of Sivan, came down on the 17th of Tammuz, went up again on the 18th of Tammuz, came back down on the 28th of Av, 40 days later, and then went up again on Chav Tes Av, and came down for the last and final time on Yud Tishrei Ayim Kippur, and that's when the Eibusha said Salachti Kidvarecha, and that's the day that Moshe Rabbeinu came down with the Luchais, second set of Luchais. That's the Simcha of the day. But regarding the 15th of Av, Maihi, what's the Simcha of the day? Amar Rav Yudah Shmuel, so Rav Yudah said in Shmuel as follows. And here the Gemara brings the first reason related to the sugya before. Yaim Shehutru Shvatim Lavi Zeh B'zeh. It's the day that the Shvatim were allowed to intermarry one with another, even in a case where it's a woman that inherited from her Shevet. And as I mentioned, the Isser, in the first generation, that you're not allowed to marry into another Shevet, but on this day, they were mater, they were able to marry into another Shevet. My Darush, what did they darshan that they learned that the Isser is only for the first generation? Zeh Hadavar, when it says Zeh Hadavar regarding this mitzvah, Davar Zeh lo Yehei Noeg Ele B'dar Zeh. And this is only for that generation when they came into Eretz Yisrael. Every Shevet should get their portion, and then after that, they could all marry with one another. What's the very great simcha in this? Really, this Inyan that the Shvatim can marry one another does not apply at all to all the Klal Yisrael. It applies to a very small amount of Yidden. Talking here about women that did not have any brother, that they end up yarshing from their father, and then the Nachla shouldn't go over to their husband or son from another Shevet. So what's the Gevaldige Simcha over here? So there's a Sikha where the Rebbe explains this and says that the point is the fact that they're able to marry one another really means that now at this point the kinyan that Klal Yisrael had in Eretz Yisrael is complete, because until this point you own a inheritance in your piece of land, part of your shevet, but the fact that you are not allowed to marry or do something that will transfer to a different shevet means there's sort of something lacking in your full rights, in the ownership of this land, to even be able to transfer to whoever you wish. So therefore, the fact that they're able to marry with one another, this is an expression of the full ownership of the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Bar Bachana Amar Rabbi Yechanan, what is it that happened on Chamishas B'Av that's such a great yontif? Yom Shehuta Shevet Binyamin, Lavi B'Kol. It's the day that Shevet Binyamin was allowed to again marry into Klal Yisrael after the tragedy and the terrible story that happened when the Yidden made a shvuah not to marry into Shevet Binyamin. As the pasuk says, the Chsiva Ish Yisrael Nishba B'Mitzvah Leima Ish Mimenu LeYitin Bitul Binyamin LeIsha, that none of the Yidden will allow their sons to marry, will not actually give their daughter, that is, to marry into Shevet Binyamin. And then it was on this day, the tradition is that they know that on Chamishas B'Av is when they will mevatel this. My daughters, what are they darshan that they took it off? They made a shvuah. So they darshaned mimenu v'lo mibanenu, that from that generation, they will not allow their daughter to marry into Shevet Binyamin, but not from the next generation, from the children. Another reason, the simcha of the day Chamishas B'Av, Rav Dimi bar Yosef Amar Rav Nachman Yom Shekolo by Meisei Midbar. It's the day that the people in the Midbar that died throughout the 40 years that they were there, on this day they stopped dying. The Master said, until the ones that died in the Midbar did not finish dying, the Eibishter did not speak directly to Moshe Rabbeinu. He only spoke through a malach, through some or through the Urim V'Tumim. Shenema, the pasuk says, when all the people finished dying, and then afterwards it says, Vayedaber Hashem Elai Leimer. Moshe Rabbeinu says Hashem spoke to me, and it uses the term Vayedaber Elai Hoya Dibur. Here, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying that it's at this point that David spoke to him. It doesn't say the lashon as it says earlier there in Parshas Devarim, Vayemer Hashem Elai, but here it says Vayedaber. It shows in the Chavivos. Or the Rashbam says because it's connected to the previous pasuk where it says Kasher Tamu, when they finished dying, that's when the Eibishter spoke directly to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rashbam here in Amar Aleph brings the Medrash that says how it was when Yidden were 40 years in the Midbar. Every year the Yidden would dig graves for themselves and everyone would go to sleep in the grave, and then in the morning the Kruz, Baska, would come out and say that those that are alive are separated to life, and then there were those that passed away, about 15,000 and change passed away every single year. Then when it came to the final year and they dug a grave and they all came out alive, and they thought maybe they were off on the time in the month, and by the time the 15th of the month came and the moon was full, they realized that it's a day that the Gzeira is over, and they made a big Mishta V'Simcha and a big Yom Tiv. And then the Rashbam says, as we see here in the Gemara, that what was the Simcha? The Simcha was not just the fact that they didn't pass away that year, but the fact that the Eibishter spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu on that year. That was the Simcha. Okay, the Gemara continues another reason for what happened to Chamishas B'Av. Ula Amar, Ula says, Yom Shebitl B'Yoshe B'Nei Pardesois. It's the day that the king, one of the Malchei Yisrael, Hoshe B'Nei, he nullified the Pardesois, which were watchmen, Shahoshev Yeravim Aladrachim, that Yeravim Ben Avat put on the ways, Shalayali Yisrael L'Regel. The Yidden should not be allowed to be Oile Regel. He had his Avodah Zarah, he had Egel Azov, and he didn't allow Yidden to go up to Yerushalayim. And there were other kings that also followed in his ways until Hoshe ben Elah came, and he was different. He was a tzaddik, and he saw that the egel they took it away, and then he took away also the shemrim, or the paradisais, and he allowed Yidden to be Oile Regel. Rav Masna says, Yom Shenitnu Haruge Beita Lekvura. It's a day that the people that were killed in Beitar, which was a big city with many Yidden that were killed after the Churban, and they were buried on that day. The Omer Rav Masner says, on this day that all the Yidden killed in Beitar were killed, Tiknu b'Yavne, they instituted in Yavne to say a fourth bracha in benching, Hatoiv HaMeitiv. And the Hatoiv was Shalei Yisrichu, that the bodies of the Yidden that were there for a while did not decompose and rot, and V'HaMeitiv Shenitnu L'Kvura, that they were buried. Rabbi and Rav Yosef Damri Tarvayu, Rabbi and Rav Yosef both say, what's the greatness of the 15th of Av? Yom Shepaiskim Boi Milichris Eitzim L'Maracha. It's a day that the wood that was cut for the Maracha, for the fire on the Mizbeach, they stopped cutting the wood on the 15th of Av. From the beginning of the summer, from Nisan until the 15th of Av, they would cut wood for the whole year, and then from the 15th of Av, they stopped. As the Gemara brings, Tanya, we learned in the Braise, Rabbi Eliezer Gad Loimer, when the 15th of Av arrived, the power, the heat of the sun is weakened. So they didn't cut wood for the Mizbeach anymore, because if it's not very hot, then the wood is not going to be perfect condition. It could be a bit moist, and it could cause to be wormy, and it's not to be used on the Mizbeach. Rav Menashe says, they refer to this day, Yom Tavar Magal, the day that they broke the axe that was used to cut the wood for the Mizbeach. So what's the big simcha of this day? The fact that they broke the axe. So the Rashbam says that the simcha of this day is the fact that they completed doing a mitzvah gedaila, and therefore they broke the axe. So the Rebbe once explained this Inyan, what's taka the great simcha over here, and also why did they break this axe? They didn't have to use it anymore, but what's the reason of breaking it? So the mitzvah gedaila here is because this is a tremendous mitzvah of Bava Basra, when these Yidden that prepared the wood for the rest of the winter, the whole year, in a time when no wood will be available, and these Yidden came in advance and prepared it for other Yidden that want to bring karbanis. This is a great mitzvah of tzedakah and Bava Yisrael. That's why this is such a great mitzvah gedaila in the lashon of the Rashbam. And Tavar Magal, the Gemara says, why did they break the axe? Because the Gemara says in another place that the Eibusha created metal as something which shortens the life of people, and therefore it should not be used for the Mizbeach. But over here, this Magal was used though to cut the wood for the Mizbeach. So the moment they didn't have to use it anymore for the Mizbeach, they cut the wood for the Mizbeach, they didn't want this Magal to sit around, which is the opposite of life. What the Mizbeach is, the Mizbeach gives life. And therefore they broke the Magal, which is to make the point that the Iker Inyan of the Mizbeach is the Kapara and the life of Yidden. Similar to what it says, La'asad Lavai, that that the swords will be turned into plowshares. So over here, they cut the Magal, or they broke the Magal. That was a great simcha on this day. From the 15th of Av going forward, the Moisef Yosef, the one that adds in his learning of Torah, the Eibishter will add days to his life. She'ena Moisef, the one that does not add learning Torah, Yosef. My Yosef, what does Yosef mean? Tan Rav Yosef tikpirei ime. His mother will bury him, because if he's not learning Torah, so then he will be buried. He'll die in half of his lifetime, as Rashbam here says. We learned in the Braise, the connection here of this Braise to what the Gemara speaks about before. The Rashbam says that we'll see Kol of Yeshua is brought up here, which was mentioned earlier in the Gemara regarding the Yerusha, that the Yarshin from the Meraglim, or Chlal, we see over here that speaks about great tzaddikim that were Isaac and Torah. Okay, so the Braise says as follows: Shiva Kiplu Eskalaylam Kulu. There are 7 individuals that encompass all of history, from the beginning of time to the end of time. They encompass the entire world. Who are these 7 individuals? Misushelach Ra Adam. Misushelach saw Adam Erishin. Shem Ra Misushelach. Shem saw Misushelach. So the Rashbam says, according to the Cheshbon, if you look in Parshas Bereshis and you see the amount of years that they lived, it comes out that Misushelach saw and served Adam Erishin 243 years. And when it says that Shem saw Misushelach, that's for 98 years. And Yaakov Ra Shem, Yaakov saw Shem. We know that Yaakov learned in the yeshiva of Shem or Ever. So the Rashbam here says 20 years, or another Gersi here is for 50 years. Amram, now the Rashbam points out that there are others, Lemech, maybe others, that you can say that they saw Adam, but the pasuk here is bringing these, that it's mentioning these tzaddikim, as mentioned, tzaddikim, that they encompass the whole world. Now Yaakov Ra as Shem. That we mentioned already, that Yaakov saw Shem. Okay, continuing further. Amram Ra'as Yaakov. Amram saw Yaakov, and the Rashbam says the Gemara knows this logically because Amram was a grandson of Yaakov. Kahos, Amram's father, was from those that came down to Mitzrayim, and Yaakov was in Mitzrayim there with the Yidden for another 17 years. So Amram was probably gave birth, or was born, that is. Amram was born in Mitzrayim and saw Yaakov. Achia Hashilaini Ra es Amram. And they have a tradition that Achia Hashilaini saw Amram. And Eliyahu Ra es Achia Hashilaini, and Eliyahu saw Achia Hashilaini. And therefore, now Eliyahu is Vadayin Kayim. He's still alive, and therefore, these are the 7 that encompass the entire world. Okay, so now the Gemara asks on this. Va'achia Hashilaini Ra es Amram. Is it true that Achia Hashilaini saw Amram? Could this be true? But V'haksiv, the pasuk says, V'loi Naisar Mehemish, that from those that came out of Mitzrayim, no one was left that came into Eretz Yisrael. Kiyim Kalev ben Yefuna veYeshua ben Nun. Only the 2, Kalev ben Yefuna and Yeshua ben Nun. And we know that in the Psukim it says that Achia Shilaini was prophesying in the times of Yeravam, much later when the Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael. So if this is the case, that means that Achia Shilaini, which was from the Yitzim Mitzrayim, and the Rashbam makes the calculation that he must have been at least 56 years old when they came out of Mitzrayim. And so, if so, how could it be that he came out of Mitzrayim and he was above the age of 20 and he did not pass away with all the people of the generation of the Midbar that passed away then? So the Gemara answers for 2 answers. So first the Gemara tries to suggest Amar Avamnune loy nigzeg zera el al shiftei shel Levi. The Gzeira for all Yidden to die in the Midbar was not on Shevet Levi. The Chsiv Midbar zeh yiplu pegreichem v'chol pekudechem v'chol misparchem yiben esrim shana v'mayla. That all Yidden will die, and it says those Yidden that are counted from 20 and older, which means misha pekudav yiben esrim, those that were counted from age 20 will die in the Midbar. Yotza Shifta Shel Levi, which excludes the Shevet of Levi, Shebkudmi ben Shloishim. They're counted from the age of 30, as it says by the Leviim that their Aveda and the Beis Hamikdash is from age 30 to 50, and that's what they were counted. Mishar, yeah, okay. So that's the answer of Rav Amnuna, which means that according to this, Achia Shilaini was a Levi. But the Gemara asks further, Mishar Shvatim Loyayil, do we not find that from other Shvatim that there was someone that entered into Eretz Yisrael? Vatanye, but we learned in Abraise, Yor ben Menashe, Mocher ben Menashe. These 2 children of Menashe, Noeldu b'mei Yaakov, they were born in the lifetime of Yaakov, and v'limesu at shenichnasu Yisrael la'aretz, and they did not die until the Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vayakameh manchi Ai, Geshleishim v'shisha ish, that the people of Ai killed or hit amongst Yidden 36 men. Now, what does this mean? 36 men. V'tanya shleishim v'shisha mamish div Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says this means literally 36 people. Amalei Rab Nechemia. So Rab Nechemia asked him and said, but v'chinema shleishim v'shisha doesn't say in the pasuk shleishim v'shisha, v'alelenemer ela ke shleishim v'shisha, that they killed like compared to 36. What does this mean? Elazar Yareb ben Menashe, they killed Yareb ben Menashe sheshokol kiruba shasanhedrin. That was as great as most of the Sanhedrin, which is 71. So 36, most of the Sanhedrin, that's who it's referring to. So we see here that Yareb ben Menashe, that was from the Yitzim Mitzrayim, and is not from Shevet Levi, but was in Eretz Yisrael. Elam Rav Acha bar Yaakov, so therefore Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, Lo nigzer gzeire, Lo yal pachas min ben esrim, v'lo yal yesam min ben shishim. The gzeire for the people of the Midbar that passed away was not for anyone under the age of 20, and not for anyone that was older than 60. Lo yal pachas min ben esrim, d'chsev min ben esrim shana v'mayla. Not on lower and less than 20 years old, as mentioned before, because it says from the age of 20 and higher. V'lo yal yesam min ben shishim, and not for more than 60 years old, older than 60 years old, because Gomar umayla me'arochin. We learn out the term that it says over here, umayla, and the term umayla that it says by erochin. Ma'ala alon, just like we find by erochin. Yesem ben shishim, that erochin is when a person says that he's going to dedicate the hektish, the value of who he is, and the Torah gives the amount that goes not according to the value of the person, but according to the age. And there the Torah says that there's the value of a person from the age 20 to 60. So just like when it comes to Erechin, Yesem ben Shishim is Kepachas mi ben Chaf, that once the person is older than 60, then it's similar to when he's younger than 20. Even though the amount, the value is not exactly the same, but both of them are less than what the value is between 20 and 60. So therefore there, V'mayla, when it says Vamaila, it doesn't only mean that below 20 is different, it also means that above 60 is different. Afkan, so to here, Yasami ben Shishim kebachas ben Esrem. When it says the Gzeira, that those that are 20 years old will die, it also means only from age 20 to 60. And those that are older than 60 are like those that are less than 20. So according to this answer of the Gemara, Achia Shilaini was not from Shevet Levi, but he was older than 60, and therefore he was not included in the Gzeira, and he ended up going into Eretz Yisrael.